Imagine your quiet suburban street turning into a nightmare where the neighbor you waved to every morning is digging a grave in his backyard at midnight, and the shovel he borrowed is yours. I have always believed that neighbors are just people who happen to live close by, nothing more, nothing less. You say hello over the fence, maybe borrow a cup of sugar once in a blue moon, and that is the extent of it. But 5 years ago, everything changed when the family next door lost their son, and now I am caught in a web of suspicion that keeps me awake at night, wondering if the man I have known for years is hiding something unspeakable in his backyard. It all started innocently enough, back when Charles, or Charlie as most folks called him, came knocking on our door with tears in his eyes. His 14-year-old boy had vanished without a trace one afternoon after school. Charlie reported it to the police right away, and soon the story was all over the local news channels, with reporters camped out on our street and helicopters buzzing overhead. My wife and I felt a deep ache in our hearts for them. We offered to put up flyers, join search parties, anything to help ease their pain. But as the days turned into weeks and then months, the searches yielded nothing, and the media frenzy died down. Years passed with no word, no clues, no closure. We assumed the worst had happened, though neither my wife nor I ever had the courage to ask if a body had been found. It seemed too cruel to bring it up. Life went on, but Charlie and his wife Kathy were shadows of their former selves. During the summer barbecues they still hosted out of habit, Kathy would sit quietly in the corner, staring at her plate, while Charlie fidgeted nervously, cracking jokes that fell flat. We understood their grief. Losing a child must be the worst kind of hell. Then, just last week, something shifted that turned my world upside down. I was dragging the garbage cans to the curb when Charlie approached me, looking more jittery than usual. He asked if he could borrow a shovel. Without thinking twice, I fetched my best one from the garage, the sturdy kind with a fiberglass handle that I use for heavy digging. I handed it over, not bothering to ask why he needed it. He mumbled something about yard work and promised to return it the next day. As he shuffled off to his backyard, I went inside to finish some chores. Later, while upstairs folding laundry, I glanced out the window that overlooks his property. There he was, plunging the shovel into the earth, carving out a massive hole that looked far too big for planting a tree or fixing a pipe. At 56, Charlie was huffing and puffing, sweat soaking his shirt. Feeling neighborly, I grabbed my spare shovel and headed over to lend a hand. I called out his name as I pushed through the gate. He froze, dropped my shovel with a clang, and rushed toward me, waving his arms frantically. "No, Tim, I got it. Please, just go," he insisted, his voice sharp and unsteady. I laughed it off at first, saying it was no trouble, but his eyes darted wildly, and he repeated himself, pointing toward the gate like I was an intruder. "I won't let you use that shovel here," he snapped. Stunned by his outburst, I backed away without another word and returned home. From the safety of my upstairs window, I watched him resume digging, glancing over his shoulder every few minutes. He worked for another half hour until the hole was deep and wide, maybe 4 feet across and just as deep. Satisfied, he scanned the surrounding houses, craning his neck upward as if checking for prying eyes. Before I could duck out of sight, our gazes locked. He saw me. I pretended to be adjusting the curtains and casually stepped away, my heart pounding. Whatever he was up to, it was secretive, and now he knew I was curious. I kept peeking out throughout the afternoon, but he had vanished, and the hole sat empty under the sun. I figured he would wait for cover of darkness, and sure enough, around 1:30 in the morning, the rhythmic thunk of metal on soil woke me. The night was pitch black, so I slipped outside in my pajamas, creeping to the fence for a better view. There was Charlie, silhouetted by faint moonlight, digging furiously. When he paused to go inside, probably for a break, I seized the moment. Heart racing, I vaulted the low fence and tiptoed to the edge of the pit. The moon cast just enough light to reveal a corner of black plastic peeking from the freshly turned dirt, a garbage bag, buried shallowly at the bottom. I froze, glancing back at his darkened house. The door was still. I looked at the bag again, then the door, then the bag, debating whether to pull it up or flee. Common sense won. I bolted back to my yard just as Charlie emerged, but he wasn't heading to the hole. He vanished around the side of his house, out of sight. I snuck inside, slid into bed beside my sleeping wife, and lay there staring at the ceiling, mind reeling. By morning, the hole was filled in, the lawn patched with fresh sod that looked out of place. Charlie's SUV was parked on the street now, not in the driveway, as if he needed quick access. What happened in those wee hours? Did he unearth whatever was in that bag and load it into his vehicle to dispose of elsewhere? The thought that chilled me most was the missing son. Could that bag have held remains from years ago, hidden all this time? It sounds insane, but the timing, the secrecy, the shovel, it all fit a horrifying puzzle. I haven't breathed a word to anyone, not even my wife. Charlie never returned the shovel, and he's been dodging me ever since, hurrying inside when he spots me outside. Then yesterday, while watering the plants, I glanced up and saw him at his window, staring straight into mine. The moment our eyes met, he yanked the blinds shut. It was broad daylight. Now I jump at every shadow, terrified of what he might do if he thinks I know too much. Do I call the police on speculation alone? Confront him and risk everything? Or pretend nothing happened and hope it goes away? I am trapped in my own home, watching, waiting, wondering if the monster next door is closer than I ever imagined. Growing up, my family moved a couple of times, but the scariest chapter unfolded in our first house when I was 15, just months before we packed up for good. We weren't the type to mingle with neighbors. The folks next door had 2 boys, Eric and Todd, whom my brother and I had barely spoken to in all those years, even though we knew their names from mail mix-ups or school chatter. One afternoon, while my 10-year-old brother and I shot hoops in the driveway, Todd sauntered over, the older one, about my age. He struck up a chat, asking if the rumors were true about us moving soon. I handled the talking, confirming we were relocating in a few months. Before parting, he invited me to join him and Eric the next day for some target practice with BB guns down by the river in the woods. It sounded like a harmless adventure, and with the weekend free, I agreed. My brother piped up at the last second, asking if he could tag along. Todd shrugged and said sure, then headed back. The following evening, as dusk approached, the doorbell rang. We answered quickly, keeping it secret from our parents since real guns weren't part of the plan, or so we thought. Eric and Todd showed up in full camouflage, lugging a heavy duffel bag, faces set in grim determination. My brother and I exchanged glances, stifling giggles at their over-the-top seriousness as we trudged along the sidewalk in silence. The woods were a short walk, thick with trees and the murmur of the river. Todd unzipped the bag and handed us what looked like BB guns at first. Then Eric snatched a branch, snapped it off, and hurled it into the water with unnecessary force. Our amusement faded. Todd clarified they weren't toys, they were real firearms. Eric proved it by loading one and blasting rounds at trees across the river, the cracks echoing like thunder. Shock turned to fury. I yanked the gun from my brother's grip, stuffed both back in the bag, and declared we were leaving. Their faces twisted in anger, and as we walked away, one hurled a curse our way. We never told our parents the full story, just that the kids were odd. That night, a cold draft woke me, my window wide open. Before I could react, something hard pressed against my skull, and a voice hissed, "Shush." It was Todd, whispering threats, snitch about the guns or the outing, especially to his dad, and he'd return to kill us all. I managed a shaky, "Okay," and he shoved my head with the barrel before climbing out. For months after, I'd spot one of them at their window, peering into ours like sentinels. As moving day neared, the harassment escalated. A week out, a rock shattered against my glass at 1 a.m. Peeking out, I saw Todd aiming a pistol upward. Terrified, I dove to the floor amid their laughter, one calling me a coward. Twice more that week, they taunted us from afar. Leaving that house felt like escaping a prison. My brother and I kept the secret buried, relieved to put miles between us and those troubled souls who could have ended everything in a fit of rage. Fresh out of college and scraping by, I bought the only house I could afford in a rundown neighborhood where good neighbors are a myth. On one side, non-stop blasting music rattles my walls. On the other, the creepiest duo I've ever encountered, an older woman in her 60s, unfriendly and vacant-eyed, living with a younger woman afflicted by severe mental issues. Their connection is a mystery, perhaps mother and daughter or caregiver in charge. From my porch, I'd witness the older one restraining the younger during meltdowns, arms flailing, body rocking violently, screams piercing the air. Sometimes the younger one pointed at me, muttering accusations I couldn't decipher. It unnerved me enough to retreat indoors. 2 weeks ago, on a night I needed early sleep for work, their chaos peaked. The younger woman's wails and the older one's frantic shouts lasted an hour. Fed up, I stormed over and pounded on their door. The older woman answered with a scowl, demanding what I wanted. Politely, I asked them to quiet down. She smirked disdainfully just as the younger one burst in, shrieking, "How dare you!" Over and over. The older one blocked her advance and slammed the door. Defeated, I returned home, but silence finally fell, granting me rest. I awoke abruptly, thinking the night flew by, but the clock read 3 a.m. Relieved, I drifted off again, only to jolt awake 20 minutes later. A faint noise from downstairs. I strained to listen, then dismissed it. But soon, unmistakable sounds, creaking floors, muffled thuds. Panic rising, I fumbled for my phone but hesitated to illuminate the room, fearing what it might reveal. Scanning the darkness, no figures lurked in corners. Then, from the bed's edge, a low groan. Directing the phone's glow downward, a pale face emerged from under the bed frame, the deranged neighbor, eyes wild. She unleashed a blood-curdling scream, as if burned by the light. I screamed back, scrambling away, tripping in my haste. She pursued on all fours, howling. I slammed the bedroom door, raced downstairs, and barricaded the upper access before dialing emergency. Police arrived to pounding in gibberish screams. I explained her instability and next-door residence. The older woman appeared, begging for leniency, but officers took the younger one in overnight. One asked if I'd press charges. The older one's glare could curdle milk, pure hatred. I declined, but her stare lingered as they drove away. She soon followed in her car. I never thought the nightmare would follow me beyond that first house, but suspicion has a way of burrowing into your life like roots under concrete, cracking everything you thought was solid. After we moved from the house with Eric and Todd, my family settled into a quieter suburb 2 towns over. The new place had a bigger yard, a basketball hoop already bolted to the garage, and neighbors who waved without staring too long. For the first time in months, I slept with my window cracked open, letting in the summer breeze instead of fear. My little brother adjusted faster than I did. Kids bounce back like rubber balls. He made friends at the new school, joined a soccer team, and the gun incident faded into a story we swore never to tell. But I carried it like a scar under my shirt, hidden but always there when I changed clothes. Every new face I met got sized up. Are you the type to pull a trigger for fun? Do you watch Windows at night? College came and went in a blur of lectures, part-time jobs, and cheap apartments shared with strangers who became friends. I graduated with a degree in graphic design, dreaming of a corner office in the city, but reality handed me student loans and a job market that laughed at entry-level portfolios. The only house I could afford was in a neighborhood the realtor called up and coming, which everyone knew meant run down but cheap. The streets were lined with sagging porches, chain-link fences, and cars on blocks. My side of the duplex shared a wall with the blasting music family, the other side was the creepy duo I learned to avoid. I told myself it was temporary. Save for a year, build a portfolio, move to something better. But temporary has a way of stretching when paychecks barely cover rent and ramen. The first month in the new house, I kept to myself. I mowed the tiny patch of lawn, painted the peeling front door a cheerful blue, and hung curtains thick enough to block the view of the neighbors' overflowing trash cans. The older woman next door, Mrs. Harlan, I learned from a utility bill left in the mailbox by mistake, never acknowledged me. She shuffled to her car in the same faded housecoat every morning, returning with grocery bags that clinked like bottles. The younger woman, who I later heard the cops call Lydia, stayed inside most days. When she did emerge, it was for explosive episodes in the yard, rocking, screaming, pointing at invisible enemies. Mrs. Harlan would wrap her arms around Lydia from behind, murmuring in a voice too low to catch, until the storm passed. I watched from behind my curtains, equal parts pity and unease. Mental illness is a heavy cross, but when it lives next door and stares through your windows, pity gets crowded out by self-preservation. The night Lydia crawled out from under my bed wasn't the first time our worlds collided, just the most violent. There had been smaller invasions before, footprints in the flowerbed I'd just planted, my porch light unscrewed until it dangled by wires, a single red handprint on the siding that washed away in the rain. I chalked it up to neighborhood kids or drunk partiers from the music side. But after the bedroom incident, the handprint took on new meaning. Lydia's palms were always smeared with something: paint, food, dirt. I started locking every window, every door, even when I was home. I bought a security camera for the porch, the kind that sends alerts to your phone. The first week, it caught raccoons, a stray cat, and Mrs. Harlan staring directly into the lens at 2:17 a.m., housecoat flapping like a flag of surrender. Work became my escape. I designed logos for small businesses, edited photos for real estate listings, anything that paid. My boss, a kind but harried woman named Carla, noticed the dark circles under my eyes. "Rough neighborhood," she asked one afternoon over coffee. I laughed it off, said the walls were thin. She offered to let me crash on her couch if things got bad. I thanked her but declined, pride is a stubborn tenant. Instead, I doubled down on saving. Every extra dollar went into a jar labeled, Escape Fund. I imagined a studio apartment downtown, maybe even a roommate who played music at reasonable volumes and didn't hide under beds. But the neighbors had other plans. A week after the police took Lydia away, Mrs. Harlan started leaving things on my doorstep. First it was a single wilted dandelion, roots still clinging to dirt. Then a child's plastic toy, a cracked soldier missing an arm. I threw them in the trash, but the next morning there was a Polaroid photo, my house from across the street, taken at night, the porch light glowing like a beacon. No note, no explanation. I installed a second camera facing the street. The footage showed Mrs. Harlan placing each gift with deliberate care, like offerings at a shrine. She never looked up at the lens, as if she knew exactly where the blind spots were. I stopped sleeping. Every creak in the old house became footsteps. Every shadow in the hallway stretched into Lydia's contorted face. I bought a baseball bat and kept it beside the bed. I researched self-defense laws, pepper spray regulations, even considered a gun but couldn't stomach the irony after Eric and Todd. My brother called one night, voice bright with news of his new job in California. "You should visit," he said. "Sun, beaches, no weird neighbors." I promised I would, soon. But soon felt impossible when your own street felt like enemy territory. Then Charlie entered the picture, or re-entered, depending on how you look at it. I'd met him once before, years earlier, at a neighborhood watch meeting the city forced on us after a string of car break-ins. He was the quiet type, nodding along while others argued about streetlights and speed bumps. His house was 2 blocks over, a tidy ranch with American flags on the porch and a lawn mowed in perfect diagonals. I remembered the missing son from the news, the way Charlie's shoulders had folded in on themselves during the press conference. Time had straightened him somewhat, but the eyes were the same, haunted, darting. Our paths crossed again at the hardware store. I was buying deadbolts, he was purchasing a post-hole digger. We ended up in line together, awkward small talk about the weather. He recognized me from the old block, asked how the new place was treating me. I lied and said fine. He paid for his tool and left without another word. 2 days later, he knocked on my door holding a plate of brownies. "Kathy's recipe," he said. "Thought you might like some." I took the plate, thanked him, and closed the door a little too quickly. The brownies sat untouched on the counter for a week before I tossed them. Paranoia tastes like chocolate and guilt. The digging started a few nights later. I was up late working on a logo when the rhythmic thunk 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 carried through the open window. It was coming from Charlie's yard, though his house was too far for the sound to travel naturally. I grabbed a flashlight and walked the 2 blocks, telling myself I was just checking for burglars. His backyard gate was unlatched. The hole was already massive, illuminated by a single work light on an extension cord. Charlie stood at the bottom, shovel, moving in mechanical arcs. He didn't hear me approach until I was almost at the fence. "Everything okay?" I called softly. He startled, nearly dropping the shovel. "Tim, what are you doing here?" "Couldn't sleep. Heard digging. Thought I'd check." He climbed out, wiping sweat from his brow. "Just putting in a new septic line. Old one's shot." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. The hole looked nothing like a septic trench, too wide, too deep, no pipes in sight. "Need help?" I offered, more to see his reaction than anything. "No." Too sharp. Then softer. "I've got it. Go home, get some rest." I left, but not before noticing the black garbage bags lined up against the shed, the kind heavy-duty enough for yard waste, or worse. That night, I dreamed of Lydia crawling through underground tunnels, emerging in Charlie's hole with dirt-caked fingernails. The next morning, the hole was filled, the lawn smoothed over with fresh sod that didn't quite match. Charlie's SUV sat in the driveway, back hatch open, a tarp visible in the cargo area. I watched from my porch as he loaded something heavy, the vehicle dipping under the weight. He drove off before I could get a better look. Coincidence piled on coincidence until the weight threatened to crush me. Mrs. Harlan's gifts escalated. A child's shoe, size small, caked in mud, a lock of hair tied with blue ribbon, a cassette tape labeled, "Play Me," in shaky handwriting. The tape contained 30 minutes of Lydia whispering my name, over and over, interspersed with Mrs. Harlan's voice saying, "He knows too much." I played it once, then smashed the cassette with a hammer. I called the police again, showed them the tape, the photos, the escalating harassment. The officer who responded was the same one from the bedroom incident. He listened patiently, took notes, promised to increase patrols. But without a direct threat. "Our hands are tied," he said. "Move if you can." Easier said than done when every paycheck went to survival. Charlie became a regular fixture in my surveillance. He'd drive past my house slowly, sometimes stopping to idle at the curb. Once, he waved. I didn't wave back. I started varying my route home from work, taking side streets, parking 2 blocks away. The baseball bat moved from bedside to under the driver's seat. My brother flew in for a weekend, concerned after weeks of evasive texts. I picked him up at the airport, and we drove the long way home so I could point out the landmarks of my unraveling life, the duplex with the music, Mrs. Harlan's house with the flickering porch light, Charlie's ranch with the too perfect lawn. He listened without interrupting, a skill he'd perfected in therapy after our childhood. Over pizza in my cramped living room, I spilled everything, the guns, the threats, Lydia under the bed, the digging, the gifts. When I finished, the silence stretched until the refrigerator's hum felt deafening. "You need to leave," he said finally. "Not tomorrow. Tonight." "I can't. The mortgage." "Screw the mortgage. You're in danger." He offered to help pack, to drive the U-Haul himself. I wanted to say yes, but pride and exhaustion glued me to the couch. "1 more month," I promised. "I'll have enough saved." He left the next morning with a hug that lingered too long. 2 days later, Mrs. Harlan's car was gone. The house next door sat dark and silent, curtains drawn. I should have felt relief, but absence can be more unsettling than presence. Where had they gone? Were they watching from somewhere else? Charlie knocked that evening, holding my missing porch camera, the one that had vanished from its mount weeks earlier. "Found this in my yard," he said. "Kids, probably." His smile didn't reach his eyes. I took the camera, noticed the memory card was missing. He lingered on the step. "You look tired, Tim. Everything okay?" "Fine," I lied. "If you ever need to talk." He trailed off, then added, "Grief does strange things to people." I closed the door without inviting him in. That night, I packed a go bag, clothes, laptop, the escape fund jar now holding $4,327 in crumpled bills. I hid it in the trunk of my car, parked 3 blocks away under a broken streetlight. Sleep came in fits, haunted by dreams of holes that connected every house on the street like worm tunnels. At 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed with a security alert. The porch camera, reinstalled that afternoon, showed movement. I opened the app to see Charlie standing on my doorstep, holding a shovel. My shovel, the one I'd lent him months ago in another life. He raised it, not to dig, but to knock. 3 slow raps. I didn't answer. He waited, then placed something on the mat and left. The camera caught the object, a small wooden box, the kind that might hold a child's treasures, or bones. I didn't open it until sunrise, using gloves and a butter knife like a crime scene tech. Inside was a single Polaroid, the hole in Charlie's yard, mid-dig, with a black garbage bag visible at the bottom. On the back, in the same shaky handwriting from the cassette, "Some secrets stay buried. Others dig themselves out." I called my brother. "Pick me up at the corner in 20 minutes. While I waited, I left a note for the realtor taped to the front door, "House for sale. Keys inside. Take the furniture." I walked away without looking back, the weight of 3 houses and too many nightmares finally lifting with each step. The moving truck would come later, my brother had connections. For now, the road stretched open, and the rearview mirror showed only empty street. Somewhere behind me, holes were being filled and secrets relocated. But I was done digging for answers that only led to darker earth. The next chapter would be written far from suburban graves and midnight shovels, in a place where neighbors were just people who happened to live close by, nothing more, nothing less.